The greatest murder mystery of Bavaria. A true story that still lives in the minds of people there to this day. 3 a.m. A remote farmhouse in Bavaria, southern Germany. Far from town, far from help. No streetlights, no close neighbors. Just open land and darkness. You're in bed when you hear it. Footsteps above you. Slow, heavy, deliberate, like someone has been pacing for a long time. You grab a lamp. You climb up. You check the attic. Nothing. No shadow. No one. But the next morning, you see tracks in the snow. Footprints leading toward your house, and none leading back. From that moment on, the question isn't, is someone coming? The question is someone already inside? Hinterkaifeck wasn't a village. It wasn't even a proper settlement. It was a single farmstead in Bavaria, Germany, isolated outside the nearby town. In 1922, isolation meant more than loneliness. It meant delay. Minutes turning into hours if something went wrong. The Gruber household lived there. Andreas Gruber, the strict patriarch. Victoria, his adult daughter. 2 children, young Cecilia and the infant Joseph. And there was also a maid working in the home. People who visited later described the farm with the same uneasy tone. Cold, heavy, uncomfortable. Not just because of the weather, but because it felt like the property watched you back. And then, in the days before the murders, the farm began to give warnings. It started with noises, footsteps in the attic. Not one night, several nights. Andreas investigated. He went up with a lantern. He searched. He listened. Nothing. Then something even more unsettling happened. A key reportedly went missing. And that changes everything. A missing key isn't just a lost object. It's access. It means someone could enter quietly, without force, without obvious damage, and without raising immediate alarm. Then the snow came. Footprints appeared leading toward the farm, but there were no tracks returning, as if someone arrived and stayed. In a movie, this is when you'd tell the family to leave, but they didn't leave. They stayed, because most people do. They searched for logic, the wind, the animals, the old building settling, anything other than the worst possibility, that someone was already there. There was another detail that haunted people afterward. The previous maid had quit. Local accounts said she felt unsafe. She mentioned the strange noises and an atmosphere she couldn't explain. Not long after, a new maid arrived. It was her first days on the job. She barely knew the family. She didn't know the property. And she didn't fully understand what had been happening there at night. If you're new to a place like that, and you hear sounds in the attic, you might tell yourself it's nothing. Because the mind tries to protect itself. It reaches for the simplest explanation. But sometimes, the simplest explanation is the most terrifying. Someone is actually there. Then the farm went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that makes people look twice. It began with absence. The Gruber family stopped showing up where they normally would. No one saw them in town. Cecilia didn't appear at school, and messages went unanswered. At first, people assumed something ordinary, a family matter, bad weather, sickness. But then neighbors noticed something that didn't fit. The farm animals were still alive, and they appeared to be cared for. That detail mattered, because it suggested someone had been on the property after the family was last seen. Some locals also reported signs that life continued in small ways. The stove seemed to have been used, and the farm didn't look abandoned in the usual sense. It looked interrupted, as if routine had been cut off suddenly, not ended naturally. Concern turned into action. A small group of locals, people familiar with the farm, went to check. They approached carefully, calling out, expecting someone to answer. No answer. They moved closer. They checked the buildings. They stepped inside. And then they found what no one wants to find. I won't describe the scene in graphic detail, but investigators later focused on one chilling point. The victims were found in more than one location on the property, and the pattern suggested they were not attacked all at once. It looked as if one person may have been drawn out first, then another, each walking into danger without realizing what had already happened. And that creates the first major mystery. How does something like this happen on a farm where people are close together, without a single alarm reaching the outside world? No screams reported, no desperate run to a neighbor, no urgent warning sent ahead of time, just silence. Now we reach the detail that made Hinterkaifeck impossible to forget. There were indications, important to say, indications, not absolute proof, that the killer may not have left right away. Think about what that means. Not just a crime, but presence. It would mean someone stayed after the violence, someone remained on the property, someone had time to watch the road, time to listen for footsteps coming toward the farm, time to move through rooms where no one should have been moving at all. That is what makes this feel like true horror. Not only what happened, but the idea that the person responsible may have felt no urgency to flee, as if, for a while, the farm belonged to him. Over the years, theories multiplied. One theory: someone local, a neighbor, a familiar face, someone with resentment, jealousy, or a personal motive. In small communities, everyone knows everyone, but no one truly knows what another person is capable of. Another theory: someone who knew the property. Because a farm isn't a city apartment. You need to know the layout. Which doors creak, where you can move unseen, how to approach without being noticed. In this theory, the missing key becomes central, not just a clue, but a warning. A third theory: conflict connected to the household, rumors, tensions, complicated relationships. Speculation grew because the case stayed open. And when there's no final answer, people fill the silence with stories. But the truth is simple and frustrating. The case was never convincingly solved. And that uncertainty left room for the most chilling possibility of all. What if the killer had been inside before? Not once, but more than once. In the attic, in the barn, on the property at night. Watching, waiting, learning the routine. Some crimes can be explained with a single word: money, jealousy, revenge. But this one feels different. It feels like the boundary between home and danger was erased, because home is supposed to be the safest place you have. And yet this case suggests the opposite. Safety can be an illusion, one that exists only until someone decides to break it. The footprints in the snow became the perfect symbol. Someone came and did not go back. And it leaves you with a question that lingers long after the story ends. If someone could enter that farm unseen and remain there, how many other places exist where someone is already inside, and no one knows? Hinterkaifeck became a legend, but not because people enjoy being afraid. It became a legend because it strikes at something deeply human. The belief that it cannot happen to us, that our home is secure, that we would notice if something was wrong. But this case whispers something else. Sometimes you only realize it when it's too late. Sometimes the signs are there: noises, a missing key, tracks in the snow, and you keep living anyway, because life forces you forward. And that is the real horror, not a monster under the bed, but the idea that someone is walking above you while you're trying to sleep. If this story stayed with you, if you want more true crime and horror stories told like this, subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what you think really happened at Hinterkaifeck. Was it someone local, someone who knew the farm, or someone who had already been inside for days?